Tomorrow is usually something that's new. It's about meeting new people, destinations you have your sights on, creating new technologies that would change the way mankind lives, and problem solving. One of the first things we tend to do when we're moving in this rush for disruption, and I've called ourselves disruptors many times, and I think we've made this mistake many times, is to attempt to do something which is from scratch, reinventing the wheel from scratch. And the first thing we've learned, and one of the biggest things we've learned at TeamIndus is, if you're going to the moon, you start on the shoulders of giants. And the giants for us is the Indian Space Research Agency. A lot of us, when we're thinking about tomorrow, and growing up when we thought about tomorrow, had moonshots in our head. Didn't call them moonshots growing up. It became a term that's popular now. But you have a dream that you want to work with. And most often, you think, this is maybe I'll wait for the right time, or I'll wait for the right resources to make something happen. The second learning that we've had is there's never a right time, and there's never the right resources to make something happen. You have to create that. In 6 months from now, the PSLV, which is the Indian Space Research Organization's Warhorse rocket launcher, is going to launch the world's first privately funded space exploration mission to the moon. In case any of you all haven't caught it right now, TeamIndus is building a spacecraft to land on the moon early next year. When that PSLV launches, it will not only carry our spacecraft, but it will carry the aspirations of every Indian who has either interacted with this or got to know about this or feels that in some way India should be in that space club of landing on the moon. Now, this is a very complicated engineering feat. It is something that has been accomplished only by 3 superpowers: the Americans, the Russians in the 1960s and 70s, and the Chinese in 2013. When we thought about going to the moon, the Chinese hadn't even attempted that, and it had been 40 years since man had attempted going to the moon. Why did we start? Everyone has a dream, and right now Madan was telling me his dream growing up was being very interested in astronomy. The feedback he got yesterday was everybody wants to go to the moon, but we all don't go to the moon. So everyone needs one small catalyst to get you moving, and ours was the Google Lunar X Prize. This was a competition that was started in 2007, and it required privately funded teams to build and land a spacecraft on the moon. You had to move 500 meters, and you had to send images back as evidence of doing so. To start with, 29 teams, usual suspects, 3/4 were American in Europe, 1/4 was the rest of the world. Today, there are only 5 teams left: 2 American, an Indian, a Japanese, and an Israeli team. And I risk saying this because I can see this is being taped, but the 2 American teams, according to me, don't have a chance. That leaves us with the Japanese, the Israeli, and us. The Israeli team is our sure shot competitor. It's a 2-horse race, according to us. And the Japanese team is flying aboard our spacecraft. Let me show you how. These are the elements of what we have in our mission. The first one is Ika. Ika is going to be the first Indian on the moon, and she's a she. Ika is 6 kgs, first of her kind, small category, under 10 category rover in the world. The Chinese mission, their rover was 150 kgs. Ika here is 6 kgs. So she's going to be the first of her kind rover on the moon, and therefore we worked a lot in testing her wheels, getting her structure right so that she could navigate the difficult terrain of the moon. Ika fits into the spacecraft. That's a structural model of our spacecraft. And the spacecraft is all aluminum. It's 9 feet wide, 6 feet tall, has 6 sensors, 1 450-watt engine, 16 thrusters that help us to navigate it with. The spacecraft is something that we've built in our facility also, which is here in Bangalore itself. This spacecraft fits into the nose cone of the PSLV. So the first 2 elements we are building. The third element is something that we purchased from the Indian Space Research Organization. What does the PSLV do? So this is how the PSLV launches. How many of you all have ever watched a PSLV launch? Yeah, wake up early in the morning, watch Doordarshan do it, and you see the fire that goes up. So there are 4 stages to the PSLV. Its propulsion is solid, liquid, solid, liquid. So solid gives it a huge thrust, liquid lets it correct attitude, which means direction. Again, solid gives it a thrust. Again, liquid makes it go in the right direction. And that, in that fourth stage, is when our spacecraft will separate from it and go on its own journey. So this stage of solid, liquid, is a 15-minute ride. And the PSLV will leave us at the closest edge to the Earth. That's called the perigee. We're very close to the Earth. We're 800 kilometers away from the Earth. And that's when our spacecraft begins its journey from Earth to the Moon. So our spacecraft does 2 orbits around the Earth. One is to increase velocity, so we can slingshot to the Moon. And the second is because that's the first time we're testing our engines. And we wanted an extra orbit and an extra time to test this engine. So it leaves us in a highly elliptical orbit. And that orbit, then we do something called a translunar injection, that it's often much easier to go to the Moon than manage technology on Earth. So we do 2 orbits around the Earth before we slingshot towards the Moon. It's a 110-hour journey from Earth to the Moon. And then we do a very specific propulsive burn to be caught into the lunar orbit. We do that burn a little strong, and you'll impact with the Moon. And if you do that burn a little weak, we'll just come back and pretend this was always a Mars mission. So when we get caught in the lunar orbit, we keep reducing our orbits till we are ready to descend. Only 3 countries have landed on the Moon, the Americans, Russians, and the Chinese. Remember, these are all superpowers, government agencies with massive resources dedicated towards that one objective. We would be the first ever private enterprise to attempt something like this. It's also the most difficult, therefore, trickiest part of our mission because there's no data out there. There's nothing that you can work with. These are algorithms that we have been working with for the last 6 years, non-stop, creating different scenarios of how you need to land. Once we land, the rover disembarks from the spacecraft and does her journey of 14 days on the lunar surface. From Earth to Moon would take us about 575 hours. So 575 hours after we launch, we will place the Indian tricolor on the lunar surface for the first time. Because the Earth rotates on its axis, we need deep space networks across the globe to be able to constantly communicate with the spacecraft. So we have Bailalu, which is a little away from Bangalore, which was built during Chandrayaan-1. And we have Goldstone, which is 180 degrees away outside LA, through which we communicate. Biak is something near the Indonesian islands that will cover us when we launch. Madrid and Canberra are other stations that we use. These are some of the tests, and it's just to give you a feel of what kind of testing we do. The first one talks about looking at algorithms to look at the descent. Like I said, descent is the toughest part of what we do. So it's a precision robotic arm that looks at descent and a camera taking that data in. The second one was when we tested our spacecraft for impact on landing. So back in 2014, the organizers instituted a milestone prize and said, if you could prove some of your technologies terrestrially here, they incentivized it because these were all ragtag teams. We are all garage, server room kind of teams that had come up, and space is an expensive mission, so they said, hey, we'd incentivize it for you to be able to prove your technologies. We tested this at ISRO's facility and at NAL. One, whether it could withstand the vibration that would be subjected to by the PSLV, and secondly, which is, could it withstand the impact and the load of landing on the Moon. So the last 6 meters is a free fall for us on the Moon. So we tested this, giving into account the difference in gravity for 1 meter. I'm telling you, if I started an auction of what is it tougher to do than going to the Moon, this is one of them for sure, to get your presentation to work. We started off a team of 4 or 5 people. We've grown to 120 today. Our secret sauce is to be able to put the 2 diverse teams we have together. So we have one average, which is 23 years old, and one average, which is 68 years old. And we put these 2 folks together. The 68 are the retired ISRO scientists who work full-time with us. They are the heads of the different engineering departments, and they work with the energy, passion, new way of thinking of the young ones, the competence and experience of the old ones, and that works magic for us. We've had some validations along the way. The French Space Agency is flying its cameras aboard our spacecraft. So from all the teams, they decided to fly with us. So Ika's eyes are going to be French cameras. The University of Colorado, again, chose us to work with, and they're designing our ground software. And the Japanese team, like I was saying earlier, they don't have a spacecraft of their own. So they've decided from any of the teams who have a chance to land, it's probably us, and they're going to fly aboard our spacecraft. We genuinely believe, and it's a concept called pronoia, and pronoia says that if you truly, desperately want something, and you want to make something happen, and you work hard towards it, the universe conspires to make it happen. These are some of our conspirators. They're the ones who've guided us, mentored us, wrapped us on our wrists when we went wrong to enable this to go forward. The future that we have often rests in, and I think that that's the future that we'll have, is to get people to come and collaborate on a platform, people to come and rally behind making something happen. And that's the philosophy that we've built this mission by, to say, can we get all of you, every Indian, every non-Indian out there, excited about doing something like this, excited about taking India, taking mankind back to the moon after all these years. This is one of the programs that we have. We're giving you an opportunity to do all three of these. Watch it, but watch it from the control room. How many of you watched Interstellar, Martian? You saw NASA's control room, the cool room where they're counting down, where all the scientists are there, where the engineers are sitting. We're inviting 2,000 folks from across the globe to say, come be a part of our command center. Be a part of the voices. Be a part of the day before the launch. Can you hear the ground checkout, which is happening in Sriharikota? Can you hear the mission director talk about his flight readiness? Be a part of watching the launch when you're sitting in that control room. The difference between watching that on TV and sitting in the control room is it's different. And you're sitting with the folks who've built it. It becomes yours, you become a part of it, you become part of the crew, which is very different from seeing it on TV. Be a part of the mixed reality. So this is a JPL Mars mixed reality software. We're building our own, which makes you experience the lunar surface when you're there, makes you experience walking with Ika when she's there, and get you a true immersive feeling of what it takes to be on the moon. There are 45 such control screens that we have, and these are our mission control screens. We would take you through all of them, get you to understand the science behind it. Why do we have telemetry? What is the X band and the Y band through which we're communicating with the spacecraft? I explained the whole trajectory, what's happening at each stage of the trajectory, what happens at each stage of the PSLV, but there's that much you can just watch the spacecraft launch, because the launches are quick and immediate. We'll make it fun. How many of you watched Hidden Figures? Very few. Hidden Figures was like the hot movie to watch this year, and it talks about these women, Catherine being the main one, she goes up to a board and explains what does it take to ensure that the rocket won't crash. We'll have our engineers who do exactly the same job for us to help you understand and decode the science behind these movies, decode the science behind Interstellar. Interstellar is supposed to be one of the movies which is closest to reality. You watched Interstellar, they're talking about time warps and quantum physics, and that's the closest to reality. We'll make all that happen for you. And this nobody said, and this I don't commit. But when we land on the moon, we have 14 days of surface operations. Ika will finish her requirements of the competition in the first 4 days, which gives us 10 days for her to explore the lunar surface, for anyone in our command center to drive her when she's on the lunar surface, and to find water or NASA artifacts on the surface. But this is an experience which I term as something that money can't buy. You can't go to NASA and say, can I sit and drive your rover when it's on the moon? You certainly can't do that with ISRO. But this is an opportunity we would like to offer. This is us. We're Har Indian Ka Moonshot. We hope this platform is something that enables loads of folks to come together. It's one of the first positive things, I think, in independent India that you could rally behind. It is something that just takes India forward. So like us on Facebook, on Twitter, on everything else. Write to us on moonshot@teamindus.in and be a part of this journey. Thank you.